What do you recommend if you've been on a long flight? Because you're a bit dehydrated, you've been sat down for a long time. I guess the air pressure's a bit weird up there.
Yeah.
What do you recommend after someone's got back from something like that?
Get a nice good meal, hydrate, and go for a walk. Something that simple. The body just needs to move and blood flow needs to start going again. So you don't need a massage, not unless you have something prior to that, like, you've had a previous injury that sitting down for, let's just say, a 7-hour flight causes low back pain that it's very excruciating. But other than that, if it's just general tightness and you've been in a long flight, just get a good meal in you, drink some water, and go on like a 20-minute walk. You'll feel better again. It's that easy.
There's a lot of popular tools, massage guns, foam rollers. Where do you sit on that?
Foam rollers, even though I own one, I think is probably one of the dumbest inventions that made somebody a millionaire. Uh, only because only very few people that I've came across only use it for its true purpose, where you actually have to use a foam roller for about 20-25 minutes. When I go out to the gym floor and I see people using a foam roller, they might use it for like a minute and a half, and they're like, "All right, we're ready to go." It really didn't do anything for you, but you'll buy one and you'll use it for like a minute on each muscle. That didn't do anything for you. Massage guns, I have one here in the torture room. I think are very good to promote blood flow. So as far as, like, let's say you have a muscle knot that's just won't go away, a massage gun's not gonna take care of it. A massage gun, it's actually a treatment called tapotment, and what it does is it's just supposed to bring an abundance of blood flow to a certain area. So that's why people who are like runners, things like that, sprinters, they'll always have a massage gun with them in their little gym bag when they go out to the track, and they'll use it on their calves and on their feet and on their quads, because it's bringing so much blood flow. And to run or do a big sprint, you need that blood flow in there, because if you run like that with if you do a performance like that with a muscle that's not warmed up or good blood flow, you're gonna tear a hamstring or something on the quad. So it's just abundant like that. So.
And what did you say foam rollers are intended for then? In your mind, just longer duration, is it, or?
Well, longer duration, but it's good for tight muscle groups. That's what it's good for. It's good for tight muscle groups. When you're feeling restricted a little bit, the muscle doesn't have as much pliability. It gives the body the illusion that it's getting some kind of deep tissue massage, but you have to use it for a while. I think 20 to 25 minutes is a good time.
Per muscle?
Per muscle group.
Right.
Like the inner thigh, the quads, the hamstring. I have seen a few athletes here in the gym floor that have used a foam roller for almost an hour. And let me tell you, those athletes are never in the torture room saying they're in pain. So they can train very good, their performance is very well, and they use that foam roller almost every training session. So,
but the difference is that to really get the effects, you've got to work on it quite some time.
yeah, you have to. Releasing muscle tension isn't a quick fix. It can't happen in just 2 minutes. It can't. The muscle got tight, or it got in its environment that way for a reason, and it's not going to change like that. It doesn't have a mind where it just changes and says, "Okay, we're good. I give up. We'll do whatever you need to. We'll tighten back up later." No, it doesn't do that. So you need to give it time to relax and say, "Okay, we're going to relax a little bit." And this is what goes into the theory behind the torture room of understanding muscle vibration.
What are some of the tools that you enjoy using in the torture room? And you've got a few toolkit things behind you.
Yeah, I have a bunch of torture tools in here. So I love gua sha. So I got certified in gua sha.
What is that?
And gua sha is a form of muscle scraping, and it's an ancient Chinese method, mostly used and was designed, thousands of years ago to just get rid of negative energy in the body. It was all based on energy at the time. Now, as science has evolved, we found out, the true effects it really does and what happens to the body when it's being performed on somebody. And you can do gua sha with like metal tools, steel tools, stone, bone, and I have an abundance of all those tools. I think I have like 25 different tools here. So some look scary and some not so scary, but yeah.
And with those tools, then is there so many different ones because they work specifically for different muscle groups? Is that why they're different?
No, they're different because they all weigh differently. So the density and weight of each tool determines on the vibration of how deep it goes into muscle tissue. So not everything is always superficial. So at times, people can have scar tissue embedded deep inside muscle fibers that we need to get a little bit deeper, that just doing a basic deep tissue massage isn't going to cut it. So the scraping tools that I have that are a lot heavier can really clean that fibrotic tissue out. And then I have some that are stone, and that's very superficial because there are times where the muscle is really not the problem, it's the fascia. And I speak about this a lot with a lot of my clients. I first like to read what fascia is doing, and fascia then lets the muscle know what it needs to do. So
talk to me about fascia. I know there's been a lot of recent discoveries about fascia and what it does, things that not too many years ago we didn't even know. I did an interview, the guy called Bill Parisi, I don't know if you know Bill, but he was telling me the story how they just thought it was this stuff when they were cutting bodies open, they were just discarding it and just thought it had nothing, and now suddenly they realize it's amazing. So what have you learned about fascia, and how do you use that in the work you do?
In massage therapy? See, fascia is very unique. It's a very unique organ, and it's one of the biggest organs we have in our whole body. And if you ever look at fascia on a cadaver, and it's probably why you said they were just discarding it, it kind of looks like cotton candy. If I had to describe it in a certain way, it moves, it's very pliable. But the very unique thing about fascia is fascia carries 9 different sensory receptors. That's all it does. It's a sensory organ, 9 different ones. So that deciphers everything you're going through. Your environment, your external environment, what you're putting your body through, the exercise, the long hours at work, sitting down on a plane and when you start feeling all these aches and pains, fascia is reading all these, it's sending all these sensory receptors to muscle tissue and tendons, and it's telling the body, hey, we don't like this. And then from there, it starts to send off different hormones to different tissues of the body to say, hey, it's like the body's defense mode. But fascia reads your environment. It lets you know what's going on. And knowing that it's sensory as well, it also allows you to understand if you're in cold environment, hot environment, why you're sweating all the time. It lets you know all these things. So, but when I start working with people, I like to start from the top and work my way down. So fascia is the very first thing. And sometimes you can just say, hey, the muscle's fine. It's the fascia. The fascia is starting to cause adhesions. And that you can tell it has a very distinct, unique feeling. It feels like sandpaper.
When you feel into the muscle, it feels like sandpaper.
The second you start touching somebody, the minute I start feeling sandpaper, almost gritty, like fine grains of sand in there, I automatically know it's fascia. So we clean that out. Once that gets cleaned out.
When you say you clean it out, what are you doing? You're smoothing it. You're breaking it up. What?
Yeah, fascia can smooth out in seconds. It's not something that's a very long process. Not like muscle tissue, because muscle tissue has a sensory nerve and a motor nerve. So it's working on 2 different engines, you can say, where fascia is just all sensory, and knowing that it's very pliable and it's all collagen. So as soon as it gets warmed up, you can then start to roll it out and smooth it out. And then that's going to expose what's going on with the muscle. Then the muscle finally says, hey, we've been hurting for a while, man. Like, we're all knotted up. And knots are a totally other different thing with muscle tissue. Or it says, hey, we have a lot of junk here. we need to get this stuff cleaned out because it's just been stuck here because the fascia's not letting us roll it all out of here. So
Do you generally have to deal with fascia before you can deal with the muscle then? Is that typical?
Sometimes, not all the time. Like with muscle knots, especially if they're very distinct, muscle knot is, you can go directly to a muscle knot, and that's a motor nerve dysfunction in the muscle tissue. So, and that's
And what does that mean? It means it's firing the muscle, is it? And it's in a kind of contracted state somehow.
so the way muscle knots form, and this is a very, very unique way, but if you can understand it, it's very easy to decipher. At least for me, it is. So you have one muscle group.
Let's choose a muscle. Just
let's say the quad.
Okay.
You have four different muscles here, but you have a muscle knot that's right here on this outside quad. Now, this outside quad alone, if you saw it alone, has thousands upon hundreds of thousands of muscle fibers. So when you create an action, all muscle fibers work as one. And fascia lets you know exactly what environment you're in. So let's just say you're doing a squat. It knows that you only have 100 pounds on the squat bar, and now you have 200, and now you have 300. It automatically sends sensory receptors to all the quads to say, hey, we need to tighten this way, and then when we perform the action, we need to contract a certain way. So, but when the muscle gets too traumatized, when it hits a barrier where it says, yo, we hit our max, this is it, certain muscle fibers, because they all work together, let's just say you have 100,000 muscle fibers in just this outside quad, and you taxed it way past its limit, they all have to work together. But when a muscle knot forms, let's just say 10% of those in a very localized area, let's just say 10,000 of muscle in just one localized area, still believes it's in action. The rest of the crew, the other, 990,000 fibers, they all said, hey, dude, we're done. We don't have 800 pounds on our back no more. We're done. We're good. You can relax. And they have to work together. But some muscle fibers get traumatized too much that it still believes it's in action. So it's contracting and it stays hardened that way. And even if you try to stretch it out, it feels like a big lump. The muscle tissue says, no, we still believe we're in action. So the motor nerve is hyperactive and it's saying we need to contract, and it shortens that tissue, and it's very bumpy. It's very distinct. And that's a very distinct feeling of fibrotic tissue.
And is that easy to, how do you then release that then? Just massage again?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is where my torture room theory comes out under muscle vibration. And that's how I learned massage, is understanding vibration. Is if I realize, one thing I realize is, since muscle has a certain tone at any given time, that tone is traumatized. That muscle tissue is traumatized. So it's sitting at a different vibration. So what I've learned to discover is, if I can match that traumatized muscle vibration with external pressure, then we start playing a role of energy. And one thing that happens when a muscle knot that is very traumatized and it's carrying a certain vibration, and as soon as I match it with its own energy, it starts to poke itself at me. It says, hey, what are you doing here? It really does. It plays, we start playing this game of like, hey, I'm here. And it's like, you're not supposed to be here. I'm working. And it's like, no, I'm here. And eventually, give it a few seconds, you bring some more blood flow in there, get back on it. Eventually, it starts to relax itself. Eventually, it says, hey, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. Because when it meets its own energy externally, it's foreign energy to the traumatized muscle. And then it's like, well, we both can't occupy the same. So it's going to give up a lot faster than I will. And that's how I get rid of muscle knots.